Supposed to join onward by Master Atlan, chapter 58. Time to say goodbye. Gar slowly made his way through the thicket of trees and bushes, so once again the shade student had to marvel at the difference between his homeland and Bale, bringing with flora and life, but he quickly squashed those directions in his head and focused back at the task at hand, the Emerald Forest, a collection of ruins, and the time to show up was now. Gar looked between the two captives that he was leading from behind as they walked through the forest, their hands tied behind their backs and mouths silenced by a thick cut of tape. They led him through the forest to the destination with only slightest struggling and a few muffled arguments along the way. The red-haired raccoon spotted something different through the tree line and emerged with his prizes. So the Gar walked out onto a cliffside overshadowed by a mountain across a deep chasm. In the empty area surrounded by the forest was a ruin of broken down marble and stone. What remained of the ruins were shattered columns and pillars, partially destroyed and wrecked by years of erosion, and standing in the middle of the deep chasm beyond the edge of the cliff was a steeple that was partially destroyed with its bridge taken away. Thanks to a certain group of initiates and their battle with three vicious grim, while the view was impressive, Gar was far more intrigued by the occupants littering the area. There were several White Fang members positioned around the ruins with their weapons hanging at their sides. He could even make out what looked like bulkheads at the top of the cliffs above, but of course his attention was drawn to the two figures that looked markedly different than the rest of the White Fang members here. One was Roshi, the fondness that he had expected to meet today. The red-haired man was sitting against a piece of rubber before noticing that they had arrived, but the tall figure beside him that easily dwarfed the bearded man in size was someone God didn't recognize. He was bald except for two horse ears sprouting from the top of his head and a scarf that covered most of his face. He didn't even seem to notice their arrival until one of the guards warned him they were approaching, and the moment he looked up, it was hard not to feel the spite aimed in the direction. Miraculously, the anger being aimed at the two beacon students accompanying him. See, I told you he wouldn't disappoint us. Roshi bragged before stepping up to meet Gara with a pleasant smile and wave. Gara stepped past his charge and accepted Roshi's handshake. I'm proud of you, Gara. I knew this wasn't an easy task, but I was certain it was one you could accomplish. You can complete. Everyone from the White Fang will be pleased to know someone so capable is coming to our side. Gara, allow me to introduce you to another one of our brothers, Han. He is very committed to our goal and requested to come to our meeting as well to meet you. Gara looked around. Not alone, I see. Yes, well, we were close to Beacon's stomping grounds as well as the fact that General Arnwood of Atlas has been noted to be in Vale. We had to be cautious, so Han offered to come along and make sure everything proceeds without incident. Han, this is the boy we've been speaking about for some time. Not interested. The large man approached and looked down at the stoic red kid with a glare. No offense, kid, but I didn't come here just to meet another potential member. I came for them, and so did a lot of these guys. So if we could, God nodded and turned around to face the two students he had wrangled up. He reached up and slowly pulled the tape off of their faces so they could talk again. Lucia and Schnee took deep breaths when it was finally removed, and Weiss was quick to voice anger. I am not going to let you get away with this. Remove our restraints, and I promise you won't be so lucky as to get the drop on us a second time. I don't think that's necessary, Roshi shrugged. Once was enough. And I suppose we have you to thank for this traitorous actions. Is that correct? Weiss's voice was filled with spite and rage despite her unfavorable situation. The white-clad hair shuffled in her spot, looking around at her surroundings with pure disdain for the people around her. She was finally faced with the people that had threatened her family and company for so many years, and unlike what she had experienced with Blake and Naruto, she felt no shred of sympathy for them. Did you really have to bring so many reinforcements? Does a bound-up teenager and young lady really terrify you big, scary White Fang members that badly? Or do the names intimidate you that much? It's not that, Han said as he stepped forward to face them. We just expected more from two members of the most vile families known to Faunus. I'm sure quite a few of us are disappointed by just how tiny and feeble you really are. It still scare you, apparently. Roshi quickly stepped in front of Han before he could lash out violently against Sasuke for his comment. The older man just laughed and threatened the hostile conversation as nothing more than banter. Seems even in the White Fang he had to act as a mediator so things wouldn't escalate. Let's not make things any more difficult or hostile than necessary. Young Snee, now that even with our large guard, we have no intention of harming you or your friend. If your father, and more importantly, his company meet our demands, there won't be any. Don't bother pitching lies to me. Wise coldly cut off. If you were really planning on using me as a bargaining chip to force my father's hand, then you'd know as well as I do that having me wouldn't be enough. He doesn't negotiate with terrorists. He makes that clear with each threat you gave him. He'd simply act from the shadows and ensure I was reclaimed in a way that doesn't hurt him publicly. Of course, that's if he even wishes to be subtle about it. My. It doesn't seem like you hold your father in very high regard. Well, we'll just have to see how he wishes to act when given the opportunity. Don't expect much. Wise muttered before looking over to Sasuke. And why exactly did you want to bring him along? He isn't a threat, and there isn't much strategic value in taking him either. She ignored the pointed look from Sasuke that said to stop trying to defend him from their ire, but she chose to not notice it and continued. He might share the name of the Uchiha, but you won't find any of your storybook monster characteristics in him, so just let him go. You don't get it, do you, little girl? Hans stopped her and focused his glare on the silent Uchiha. What the Uchiha have done to us isn't something that could ever be forgotten. We've lost focus on it over the years since your family's been the one that's tried to step on us now. I guess you can take pride in the fact your family did it in a fraction of the time his did. Wise squirmed and looked aside in shame. But what they did never just vanished. Han bent down and looked Sasuke in the eyes. When we think Uchiha, we think of the people that forced us to run and hide just so we could live. When we think Uchiha, we think the group that's still trying to stop us now, when we're trying to take back our lives. When we think Uchiha, we think Madara. Sasuke's head snapped up and his eyes turned to ice. Roshi stepped back in surprise. Even Weiss was worried about his reaction, but Han let out a victorious chuckle as he stood back up. See, I bet that look has stayed the same even after all these generations. Let me ask you something. Would he be considered a black sheep or the shining example of the family? Enough! Garth finally spoke up and started the discussion before he could go any further. I didn't expect to come here just to listen about petty squabbles and family politics. I came to fulfill your request. Garth walked around and grabbed the two teens by their restraints. He pushed them forward, getting a spiritual look and snarl from Weiss as he turned between his fellow guards. I brought you this knee and the Uchiha, and I hope this shows of faith is enough for us to be on the same page from now on. You were certainly spectacular, my boy. We were right to put our faith in you. So now that you've gotten what you wanted, time to fulfill your side of the bargain. Gar stated, I want to see your headquarters, and I wish to meet with your superior directly. That may take some time. Roshi hesitantly answered him. Is even this not enough for me to earn your trust? Gar, let me explain. No, neither. When you're ready to accept me, I'll return with these two. Gar curtly stated before reaching for Sasuke and Weiss's restraints, only to freeze as a bullet impacted the ground between his feet and stopped him just short of reaching them. The sound of a sniper shot registered in his mind on instinct later. As he instinctively stepped back, Sasuke and Weiss looked back in surprise and saw the shot that cut him off. I'm really sorry it had to go like this, Gara. Roshi apologized with a shake of his head. I wanted to trust you, believe that you were a bright young man with boundless potential to help the White Fang, but some of our members were less than convinced and had other doubts in you, so we prepared in case you might act difficult. Take one step closer and you'll have a hole right through your chest. Han warned with amusement. Everyone thinks that since we're covered in aura, we're invincible, but it's the opposite. Whenever we aren't coated, we're basically just normal people. One shot, and your heart pops like a balloon. Is gloating really necessary? Roshi questioned before stepping up to grab the two hostages. Don't do anything rash or foolish, Gara. We'll be taking these two with us. Hopefully we'll meet again and try to establish a real bond of trust. I'm sure you'll see the good a good organization is doing and wish to be a part of it soon. Roshi, let me get this straight. I was just a delivery boy. I was never going to see your bases or meet your leaders, was I? Gar questioned. No, I'm afraid not. Well, that's a shame. Gar sighed before taking a deep breath. I'll simply settle for you two VIPs. In one swift movement, Gar lowered himself to the ground and slammed his hand down in the grass and dirt. The earth shifted around his hands before shooting forwards. The dust is slipping between Sasuke and Weiss to shoot up in a large wall before the furnace. Han quickly reacted, grabbing Roshi by the collar and pulling him back. Fire! Another sniper shot echoed through the area, and Han lowered his tense shoulders in relief. He watched as the wall of sand and dirt crumbled away in the front of him, only to realize that Sasuke and Weiss were completely unharmed. The Uchiha and Shinji their aching wrist freed from the restraints as God opened his hand and let the remains of the bonds sprinkle from his palm. How did it miss? Why scoffed and swiped her hair off her shoulder. Oh please, like you're the only one with a sniper on your side. What are you all just standing around for? Han barked out to all the surprised White Flag members. Open fire! The troops prepared to shower the three students in a storm of bullets. However, before they could pull the trigger, multiple shots and explosives came flying out of the tree line. The soldiers were forced to back from the furious barrage of suppression fire blocking their line of sight. Han immediately pushed Roshi behind some of the rubble as the horse summoned his aura around his arm. He ran out into the field and felt several bullets bounce off his enhanced form. He spotted the retreating forms of God and the others making their way to hide in the forest. With a roar, he started to burst out of his form before he leapt at them, reeling his fist back and charging them in a mad dash. Han stopped as he felt multiple bullets striking in the air and forced him to guard. The moment the bullets stopped, he looked up in time to see two yellow blurs jumping through the air towards him. His arms were grabbed by two almost ethereal figures that tried to lock his movement. He struggled and almost broke free of them before he saw another shadow jump up in front of him. He recognized the blonde monkey from the docks as his sudden assailant, and the young huntsman showed a quick grin before raising his shotgun with Han's face down the barrel. Han withstood the shot with a pained gasp, and then threw his arms aside and dispelled the clones. He landed back on the ground with a stumble and gingerly opened his eyes from the stinging pain. Hey, big guy! Kiba roared and charged out of the trees with his tongue pulled back. Try this! Yang yelled beside him as they ran into the massive furnace and dug their fists into his chest. Han's body went flying back from the explosive attack, and he skid over the clearing, digging his feet into the dirt and uprooting it before coming to a stop. Young Kiba looked at him in surprise before they nervously chuckled. Okay, so they weren't exaggerating about him being tough. Han snarled with rage. You brought these children with you. Did you think that would be enough to stop us? We'll be fair. It seemed to work pretty well last time we kicked your ass. Han glared intensely as Naruto came walking out of the trees, with several other students following alongside him. Sasuke and Weiss retrieved their weapons from their companions and stood alongside the group of over a dozen to face the White Fang squadron. Naruto's hand glowed with aura as he smirked. And to add insult to injury, we're going to do it one more time, unless you make things easy now and just surrender. Han's eyes glinted as he gave his response in a form of aura surrounding his body and steam bursting off of his form. Yeah, that's what I thought. Hunting. Shit! Kitamari griped as he skidded away from the edge of the cliff and hopefully out of sight from the enemy sniper. He hadn't expected someone to get his location and shoot at him after one shot. Remember, they were definitely a skilled sniper by school standards. This was the second time he had let his guard down while he was perched. If this ended up with another gun broken or sliced to pieces, he was gonna pop a vein. The young man's face twisted in anger and he bared his teeth as he looked at the edge of the cliff where the shot had nearly hit him. If you think you can beat me and shoot him, then think again. Any particular reason you're called up like that? The pointy-tailed man groaned and looked up at the large man with the short orange mohawk watching him from the bullhead, and Kitamura rolled his eyes. I was just evading a few well-placed shots from one of the amateurs down below. Shooting, countering, patience, stuff you can't really comprehend. You should probably go back to doing what you do best, and move rocks. So someone shot at you and you pulled stay out? That seems simple enough. The larger man chuckled and cracked his knuckles. If you want, I can make quick work of them so you don't have to be scared anymore. Kitamura cackled and shook his head in pity. How much stupid can you be, dumbass? This is a sniper. It's not a target that stands still or a plate of food for you to devour. You are completely and utterly useless, and no more than right now. Is that totally obvious? The rover hunched over as the vein started to pulsate while Kitamura waved his hand. Now, how about you go back to work and fuck off? Or if you can't comprehend that, just stand there and block the sun from me, okay? Can you two quit it with the barking? It's getting on my nerves. The two looked over as another figure jumped off the bullhead. A young woman with long black hair tied in a purple ribbon behind her back strolled out to join them. She lazily stretched her arms out and yawned as she looked between them with disappointment. Do you seriously have to have a pissing contest now during an operation? Or don't you have more important things to be concerned with? Does someone who was taking a nap in the ship have any right to lecture us? I'm supervising because one of us totally fucked up last time, which resulted in one of our own dying. Remember? Kinemara's teeth showed as he let out a sharp growl at her insistent reminder. If he was broken up about Saku's death and his inability to help his comrade, then he certainly kept it to himself. And did you even finish the route we told you to make? I finished it in no time. Juro pointed over to several large piles of displaced rocks. Unlike you losers, I could do my job and still have time to kill. They heard a small series of explosions ring out from down below as Jorobo pointed back at the spider. I want to come see the shit show, and all I find is this pansy curled up and about to wet himself. Shut up! I told you some little bastard down there shot at my head with explosive round. I had to get back. Kinemaro glared over at the smoking shot he once occupied. A little shit was hiding somewhere in the forest while those dumbasses were talking it up with the traitor. You know if they can warn us about him playing sides, and maybe they can throw a little word our way about a fucking sniper. Whatever. Step back and just curl up with your blanket with the big boys while the big boys take care of this. King rubbed her brow to alleviate the stress as they developed into another round of throwing insults. All the while, more explosions and screams echoed all the way out up there. She was never going to get a chance to mind her headache like this. Both of you stop. You two are arguing is getting us nowhere. You want to settle this? The two guys looked between each other and then nodded. A spark of competition settled in between them. King reached behind her and pulled out a needle and bell. Then let me set up a game. Nothing. So, remember when I got here, you kept bragging about fighting some really awesome, super cool fight with your new friends against a scary dude that hit like a train full of boulders? Yeah, I believed you. You did not have to recreate it for me. Neptune yelled at his partner before firing rapid bolts of electricity at White Fang members firing at them. The weaker grunts went down in a few shots, tumbling over whatever cover they were using and twitching on the ground as the shock affected them. Unfortunately, the shots he was taking at the very large, very angry horse fondness seemed to go unnoticed as he was too busy trying to swat and tackle the speedster student attacking him. Yang and Ruby tried to flank the massive man and while striking his joints whenever they could, but even the two combatants couldn't break through the layer of aura shot in Han and topple the behemoth threatening their friends. For the two brawlers, the best solved their problems by barreling through them. An obstacle that refused to break was a serious challenge. Whoa! Yang shrieked as she dropped to the ground and rolled, dodging the fist that came swinging for her head. Even evading the strike, she felt the massive power building up behind it. A burst of steam shooting out while the fist dug into the earth hard enough to splinter it. Yang felt lucky that he had widened it back so much, or she might have ended up and imprinting the mountainside. She still swung out to fire a kinetic shot against his torso, but to little effect. Hey, this guy isn't even budging. We noticed. Stop pointing out the obvious. Kiba roared and watched his shots bounce harmlessly off of Han's glowing form. He clicked his teeth and watched as his partner charged in to face the brute directly. Any tips? Try something new. Naruto shot a dust arrow into his aura-cloaked hand before it came to life, covered in bolts of electricity. The whiskered fox yelled at the top of his lungs and slid underneath Han's kick. He came behind and jumped up while digging into his fist, into Han's back, staggering the horse for an instant. In the moment, Naruto grabbed the wire around Han's throat, grabbing it tightly as an electric current ran through the metal. Bastard! Naruto jumped back as Han widely swung his arm around. He tore the wire off of his throat and roared as steam sprouted off his body. The young huntsman slipped back to gain some distance. If you weren't breaking through to him, then just try attacking directly. Easy for you to say. You got multi-purpose arm working for you. Yeah, we hit hard. Not a whole lot we can change up about that. Nonsense. If simply hitting hard isn't enough, a green blur dashed by them and charged the aura-class bonus. It jumped in the air and spun around before kicking rapidly over Han's upper body. The kicks didn't pierce through his ridiculous large aura, but they did knock his head around and make the massive man stumble backwards. The bull-haired man kicked off the faunus' chest and flipped through the air with a grin, then overwhelmed him with quantity. Han stumbled back and frowned through gritted teeth before looking back up at his opponents. His eyes widened in horror when he saw the end of the massive hammer coming up from his head. Despite knowing how resilient he was, and that he could take on total amounts of damage due to his massive frame and aura. Han felt something instinctively screaming for him to dodge the hammer's path. With all of his might, he forced his body out of the way of its path, the end coming just inches from striking his chin. Unfortunately, the girl wielding the hammer could wave it around like a tennis racket, so Han didn't have time to react as she spun around once and slammed straight into his chest. He went flying across the field, careening through stone and ruins, and slamming into trees before he finally lost his momentum. Whoa, I hit that guy really, really hard. Why was he shining? Nora, Kibo called, relieving his friend, and relieved his friend had arrived in time to help, and thankful for her freakish strength once more. He looked back and saw John and Pyrrha came running out of the forest with their weapons in hand to join the fight. He grinned and nearly cheered out loud. About time you guys finally showed up. We're busy making that call you guys asked for. You could have given us a little more time before dropping it on us, you know? John said before nearly doubling over to catch his breath as his lungs stopped burning and his muscles gained some strength back. The blonde leader looked up to see what they were fighting, only to pair at the sight of so many armed soldiers, his friends attacking whomever they got in their way, and the 7-foot-tall man covered in aura pulling himself out of some broken trees. He regretted not taking longer to get here. From behind a broken pillar, Roshi watched the chaos. He avoided getting caught in the fight as best he could, and instead left it to Han and his men. He had hoped that he might slip out to a bulkhead before things became too hectic, but the situation they evolved quickly, and now the ape man was afraid to even move. Roshi couldn't register the black blur that slipped up behind him faster than he could register. Reacted before he knew it, he was being bound by a black ribbon that wrapped around him and pinned his arms to his side. He looked down in shock, but went still when he noticed the tip of a rapier pointed just under his chin. My apologies, but you just look so helpless by yourself that we just had to come and help you. Roshi gulped and avoided the pricking himself on the end of the weapon. Would it be of any consolation if I told you we really weren't planning to hurt you? The Negro shook her head. You're bad at lying when you're under pressure. Roshi felt the black-haired girl behind him tighten the ribbon around his body before whispering, you can see this isn't according to your plan. Whatever your precautions were for an attacker, have fallen through. Roshi could no longer argue, as he could clearly tell that beside Han, most of his side had already succumbed to the Beacon students and their attacker. Don't struggle, or you'll just hurt yourself. Well, my dear, I'd have to agree with you on most of your points. The red conceded, shuffling nervously on his feet as he attempted to keep calm despite the tension. To be honest, I wanted to avoid direct conflict as best as possible. I'm not as eager as Han to jump into the fray and fight. Smarter, but be even smarter and just give up. Roshi hummed and took in a shaky breath. But I suppose in times of distress, we have to be ready to accept the things we want to avoid. Don't. Roshi ignored the warnings and immediately summoned his semblance, covered himself in a crimson aura that blocked his features completely. Weiss backed up in shock, but Blake persisted, accustomed to the strange sight before seeing it so many times, and making the ribbon a taunt around her foe. But she was shocked to see the black cloth immediately burst into flames around his body. In fact, Blake had only then realized through the tension she felt that the air around her had become unbearably warm. She could barely hear Weiss cry out from the other side for her to get back. Blake followed the warning and jumped back in time to notice the ground she had been standing on was slowly turning orange and beginning to melt. The majesty that burns and bubbles the rock. Most of the fighting came to a quick halt as they stopped to see the new danger presenting itself. The ground around Roshi's feet had started to melt and spread out around him. The grass immediately burst into flames just from the heat. The Beacon students looked on in shock before Roshi slowly turned his head and wiped his arms around. Globs of lava jumping out through the air. Watch out! God threw his head out, and a cloud of dust and sand flew out to intercept the molten rock. The lava fell out of the air and away from everyone in its path, melting and burning the ground instead. The young Faunus held his arms out in preparation to stop whatever might come next. Don't be intimidated. They're strong, but they aren't invincible. We just need to coordinate and attack. A shrill whistle cut off his voice. The others looked back to see several bouts of steam shoot up from the ground and obliterate the debris that had pinned Han. The massive man stood up and cracked his neck. Yes, that's right. We aren't invincible. Just damn near close. Now, he stepped forward. Who wants to try us next? Hunting. Ruby perked up as she heard the sound of fighting. From the ruins suddenly came to a halt. She gripped her sight tightly and peeked through the scope to get a better look at the fight. Even though the trees blocked most of her view, she could still spot a glowing figure tear through the clearing and attack whatever was in its way. She could make out the form of Pira, Naruto, and Yang jumping away to avoid its wrath. She had never seen her sister look so anxious while fighting someone before, and that was enough to make her scared. She wanted to be there to help her team and her friends. She should be there to fight alongside them, but she had to help however she could. Holding off the sniper Juniper and Goddess team warned them about was more difficult than she expected, and she thought she had scared them off when her first shot nearly took off their head. A moment Ruby would forever place in her coolest shots I've ever taken list. The hooded girl was certain that she had the chance to go and join her friends in the big fight, but then she realized there was more to do. She saw several massive shadows sail over from the top of the other cliff and come careening down. She looked up at the next wave of boulders dropping down towards her and lifted her rifle up to point to the sky. With a quick bit of effort, Ruby fired several bullets through the center of the fire. Several bullets through the center of the oncoming projectiles and completely destroyed them. The pebbles and rocks rained down over the forest, and Ruby hid her head under her hood to avoid any of it getting in her eyes. Jeez, what are they doing? The short huntress mumbled to herself as the rain of the breeze ended and she dusted off what covered her hood. She frowned while looking up at the cliff, trying to spot the figure who was casually throwing these giant rocks down in the first place. Was it a desperate attempt to try and hit her? Was it a distraction, or just wasting her time while her friends face off against the more terrible threat? With a groan, she peeked her head out from behind the tree. If they aren't going to show themselves, then I'll. The sound of bells ringing in her ears, causing her to pause, and the cracks of a branch behind her made her turn and unfold her scythe completely. She raised her blade in time to block the strike of thin, sturdy needles flying for her head. The first attack had more power behind it than she expected, and she stumbled back a little before quickly fixing her stance. Ruby swung her massive scythe and knocked the needles out of the air. The silver-eyed girl couldn't spot her attacker in the tree that surrounded her and couldn't determine where she was hiding. Ruby knocked the next wave of projectiles out of the air before dashing in the direction they last came from. Here! Ruby felled the tree with a single swing. She quickly spun her scythe around her and held it up to block the figure falling from their spot in the branches. The needles drummed against the scythe and Ruby quickly knocked her attacker away before they could land. They sailed through the air and flipped before landing in a crouch and smile. You're just a little girl, and he's gonna be so pissed when he finds out you shot him. It'll be hilarious. Who are you supposed to be? Ruby demanded of the older girl attacking her. The woman stood back up and continued chuckling to herself, ignoring Ruby's request. She frowned and lifted her scythe in preparation to fight him. Are you working with a white fang? If you are, then just drop your weapons now. I don't want to have to hurt you if I don't need to. I don't think I'm really working with the white fang, but I guess by your standards I would be. But right now, I'm just trying to settle an argument. The woman's voice was calm and amused as she smiled. You must actually be a pretty damn good shot despite your appearance, because you really pissed those boys off. The fact you took off one of their heads is enough of a reason for me to like you, cutie, but you picked a fight with the wrong people. What are you talking about? Who are you? Ruby yelled and aimed the end of her rifle at the strange woman that simply laughed at her. No reason to confuse you, and just know that I'm sorry. This is what's happening. The older girl lightly shrugged. You got them really ticked off, and now you got to pay for it. Unfortunately, that means really stretching out the pain, and I'd hate to see that happen to such a cute face. But then again, it'd be fun. The girl's hands blurred out to the side, the trees around her exploding from their bases as needles obliterated the roots. Ruby fired her gun, but the girl ducked to the side and hid behind the falling trees. Ruby clicked her teeth and jumped forward to clear through the trees, but the older girl was nowhere to be seen. After escaping from Ruby's sight, the young heroes looked around desperately to spot her, and before she saw several more needles flying for her head. Ruby ran through the forest as needles pierced the ground and trees around her, and some came close to hitting her. Others missed by a wide margin, but with the help of her speed to carry her along, Ruby didn't have to worry about them hitting her. But as long as her foe was sneaky enough to keep ducking and hiding in the thicket of trees, then Ruby would always be on her guard. For an instant, she spotted the dark-haired girl running and fired around, only for it to tear into the bark of a tree. She chased after her, but the older girl kept vanishing before she could reach her. Ruby's eyes narrowed, and she ran as fast as she could, disappearing in a red blur around the trees. Ruby came to a quick stop when she saw the girl running away from the trees. She slid to a stop before charging forward. A trail of petals flying behind her as she reached out. Hold on! Ruby didn't notice in her rapid dashing the sound of bells ringing while she passed. She didn't notice the snap around that impacted the side of her chest and sent her flying into a tree. Ruby fell to the grass, curled up in a ball. Her scythe dropped to the side as she wheezed and clutched her chest in pain. She gasped for air and took many short breaths in an attempt to fill her lungs. Tears came to the side of her eyes as she tried. Her horror was still around her, and bullets didn't pierce, but the blunt force behind it striking her in the ribs still hurt more than she expected. The silver-eyed girl panicked and looked up from where she was shot. Ruby's eyes widened in shock, and she jumped to her feet. Her breathing was still shallow, and she was ready to move. Wasn't ready to move just yet, but she had to dodge the giant boulders raining down over her. The boulders tore through the treetops and dug craters into the ground. When they landed, Ruby desperately sprinted ahead of the raining rock shower and didn't dare look back. She took a sharp breath and braced herself before pointing her barrel back and pulling the trigger. She was blown off her feet and onto the fallen boulder's path before rolling on the ground with her bellboard breathing and panicked rush. She wasn't as prepared for the recall as she should have been, but as long as she was out of its path for a moment, that was the win. The young huntress looked around and saw she was completely surrounded by the trees. The thick branches and leaves made it almost impossible to see through, so she should be safe from the sniper fire, but decided to on the side of caution, she still crawled over to a tree and hid away from the upper cliffside. When she was hitting, her shoulders sagged and she hung her head in relief. The young red-clad huntress carefully touched her side and flinched from the sting that lingered from the shot. Ruby carefully stood back up, but remained hidden in the shadow of the tree. With a steady breath, she peeked around the base of the tree with her scope in hand to try and spot the shooter or the one through the stones. From what that woman said, she had more than one person aiming for her up there. As long as the needle lady was still sneaking around, she wouldn't be safe hiding either. Dang, she couldn't get a clear angle at the top of the cliff. Slowly her breathing and heavily her scythe up in her arms, Ruby started running towards the sound of battle. If she could reach her friends, then they could come up with a plan and figure out what to do about these new fighters. She heard the sounds of bells ringing around her again. Her mind immediately went back to the last time she heard them and shot them, and the shot she had taken right after. She stopped in place and jumped back as the bullet came and tore through the body of the tree beside her. Ruby stumbled back and looked up to see another wave of giant rocks and boulders come dropping down around her. She shielded her eyes and coughed from the rush of dust that came over her. So it wasn't just because she was close to that other woman that they could locate her. Was it that bell sound that was alerting them? Ruby looked up at the boulders that blocked her from reaching the clearing. Lowering her scythe and shifting it back into standby mode, the young huntress carefully walked along the side of the boulders. How did they do that? How they spotting my location? Was it because of that bell noise I heard, making her way around the boulders and out the side from the top of the cliff? Ruby tried to spot any bells or chimes along the way. She hadn't seen anything obvious yet, so that older girl must have hidden them out of sight. That was annoying, but as long as she didn't do anything drastic and made her way out while conscious of things around her, then maybe we should. Ruby yelled as she was dragged and slammed against a tree. The young huntress gasped and coughed before trying to run again, and she felt the tug on her neck and looked to see her hood had been pinned to the wood. Where with a set of needles, Ruby struggled, pulling at the needles that pinned her to the tree before another set came flying and struck her in the knees. She couldn't stop the cry of pain that slipped out when they hit. Her oil was still holding, but a sharp pain persisted in her left leg. She could barely stand on it, let alone run away at full speed now. Don't bother running away. Tears formed in her eyes from the pain, but Ruby looked up and saw the long-haired girl come walking out from behind a tree. She smiled warmly and let several more needles slide in between her fingers. Her voice echoed menacingly as she threw them out into the trees and faded away. This isn't a fight. It's a game. It'll only stop once you've lost it. The sounds of bells echoed all around Ruby, and she realized that her position had been given away to the shooter. She looked up in horror and saw the leaves fly off from the path of the bullet. She closed her eyes and braced for the pain. Her heart nearly jumped out of her chest when she heard impacts on either side of her head. Then to open her eyes once the second passed, Ruby looked around to see two small bullet holes just by her head. She gasped for breath and not realizing she had been holding it as she looked around in confusion. Were these just to torment her? Was it some kind of game? Did he fire twice? Just as Ruby thought of the possibility, she noticed the sun glint off something shiny just a few meters away from her in the middle of the bullet's path for her head. Was that string? Whatever it might have been was quickly replaced in her mind by the shadows of the boulders heading her way. The fires burned in her chest as she grabbed her scythe in order to shoot them out of the air. See the bullet? I have a better idea. Ruby blinked in shock as another figure came running by the tree and stood in front of her. The boulders reached their arc and were coming down towards them as Ruby warned her to run. The older girl with the sandy hair simply pulled out two fans to her side. Ruby swore she heard a laugh before sharply waved forward. Suddenly, the wind around them picked up. The young beacon leader thought she had been trapped in a gale storm as the wind built up and went and bent the treetops away. The massive boulders that had been descending towards them came to a full stop, countered by the force of the gale. They dropped to the ground, cratering the spot they landed in, and leaving a divot of crushed grass and rock beneath. Ruby let out a sigh of relief once the fear settled. You look tired. Ruby was finally calmed enough to recognize her as the older girl from Shade. Tamara turned to her. I guess that sniper douche was giving you a hard time, huh? That's sweet. The string in front of Ruby went slack and was pulled back into the hand of Conqueror as he came walking out as well. Congrats, kid. That's going to be the closest thing of concern I've heard Tamari show others. And Tamari didn't seem to appreciate that comment and growled threateningly at her younger brother. Honestly, Ruby was just so glad they had come that she didn't bother noting how weird they were. Ruby, Ren, she called out as the green-clad boy came running to her side. When she saw her predicament, he immediately reached up and yanked the needles out of the wood and freed her hood. He bent down and let her see his shoulders as a crutch. Use her shoulders as a crutch. Why are you here? I mean, I'm really glad you guys came. But how did you know? We were coming to join the fight against the White Bank until I noticed the rocks being thrown down into the forest around here. They told me you had stayed back to handle a sniper, but then you had slipped away and that they hadn't heard from you since. Ren said as he helped her lean against one of the boulders so she could rest her legs. We came to check on you. I suppose it was just in time. Thank you. And so what happened? And Tamara curtly asked him. I seriously doubt that spindly sniper from the other day is chucking slabs of rock that big from that far away. I think there are more of them attacking, Ruby said as she looked around cautiously. There's a girl there sneaking around the forest. She said she was helping the people up there to take me out. She emphasized take me out. She throws those needles that really hurt. She emphasized while rubbing her aching kneecap. And I think she's using the bells to alert them where I am. They hear the noise and then they attack where it comes from. Bells? Seriously? Conker rolled his eyes. Who are these nut jobs? Be careful. If we move around too much, these bells will go off and they'll start to attack again, or she'll make them ring and they'll attack her anyway. Well, that's annoying. Tamara crossed her arms. So we can't try and ditch these guys. I'm sure me and Conqueror can handle the bullets and boulders while you carry her out. Actually, I want to stick around. Ruby piped up and saw the look of surprise and confusion they gave her. She took a deep breath and continued. I want to beat these guys before they cause any more trouble. If that snapper gets his side on the fight over there, they'll never be able to concentrate and win. And that lady isn't going to let us get through easily. Plus, I want to know who they are and why they're helping the White Fang. So I want to stop them before they get away. And this isn't you just wanted to get even. Well, she wasn't going to say that out loud. Hunting. All soldiers, retreat from the field immediately. We cannot promise your safety in this fight. They were surprised to hear that warning come from the reckless horse faunus that carelessly charged into battle, but they were even more surprised to see that the soldiers heeded the warning and retreated, giving up their numbers advantage without a second thought. Although that probably spoke volumes of their trust in the noble guards, Sasuke saw Han charge in like a blur towards him with his fist. He reeled back. The young Uchiha jumped back as Han's punch came dropping down and shattered the ground. The faunus chased after him, throwing punches and kicks that Sasuke desperately avoided. He ducked and leaned and stepped back as fast as he could as the horse focused solely on catching him in his barrage. Sasuke, look out! The swordsman paused and looked back to see a wave of lava burning its way through the ground towards him, an unstoppable strike from one side and a slow burning death from the other. Sasuke's eyes turned red, and he reached for his sword to prepare for a fight. Move! A blue energy bolt shot through the wave of lava coming up behind Sasuke and flew over his shoulder to hit Han in the chest. Sasuke stopped reaching for his weapon as he noticed a glyph form in the air in front of him. It changed from white to black, and Sasuke wasted no time to jump inside of it. It propelled him forwards through the opening in the lava Neptune's shot had created, and away from being cornered by the faunus. He landed in a crouch as Tenten came to help. Hey asshole! Han turned around in time to see Naruto come in from behind with his aura around his fist. It was shaking rapidly with another element enhanced it, and when Naruto threw his hand out, Han was blown back by an immense gust of wind. His friend jumped away and let the large man topple over as the blonde drew his Nodachi and jumped him. I'm ready to go next if you can handle it. Cocky shit. Han rolled to the side as Naruto's blade dug into the ground. The massive faunus jump pushed up and kicked out at his counterpart. Naruto spun around at the oncoming leg before swinging his elbow down and into the back of Han's knee. The leg bent and the blonde grabbed it before yanking viciously, lifting the horse off the ground and slamming him back down into it. However, Han seemed to simply take it in stride and lashed out with his other foot instead. It struck Naruto's guard and knocked him back far enough to let Han clamber up to his feet. However, he failed to find stable footing and slipped onto his knee again. He looked down to see a patch of grass had frozen beneath his feet, and it had organized around the bun-haired girl, stabbing her sticks into the ground. Han growled and lifted himself up before he left. He felt his leg get knocked out again by something quickly bouncing off of the ball of his feet. Don't let him get up! Pia called out as she caught her shield and confined it to run at the massive faunus. Han roared and waved an arm out in a desperate close line to knock her off of her feet, but the red-haired warrior deftly jumped over the arm and rolled on the ground before turning around and thrusting the joint of her javelin into his shoulder. Han hadn't expected the attack to have much force, but found himself tumbling backwards thanks to the jet at the end of her weapon kicking in. Speaking of kicking, take this! Han's head snapped back viciously as they came sliding over the ground and threw a kick out under his chin. The young huntsman flipped off the ground and spun through the air before landing a kick against Han's chest. The faunus slammed bodily against the ground, but Lee refused to let up. The speedy sage student continued to unleash kick after kick over the large man's form. He attempted to block and guard himself, but Lee's kicks landed wherever he was open. Lee's legs seemed to be getting faster and faster as he became a green blur, that swarmed around the glowing figure. His strikes weren't breaking through the aura, but they were hitting hard enough that Han was pinned to the ground. The others saw this as an opportunity to come running in and overwhelm him as well. Piss off! Han roared at the top of his lungs before slamming his fist into the ground. The earth split up and cracked around where he had buried his arm into the rock. The students paused for a moment to regain their footing while Han pushed up to his feet and yelled, Roshi! The red figure swept his hands out as two lines of lava formed from the rock and headed towards his fellow faunus. The student jumped back as the lava splashed against the raised rock and settled into its cracks. Han reached down and palmed a piece of raised earth, lifting it out of the ground as globs of molten rock
dripped off of it. With a mighty roar, he threw the rock at blistering speeds. The hunters in training dove out of the way of the oncoming slab as it barreled through the trees. The specks of lava sailed off of its surface and splashed against the wooden leaves. The students looked back and saw the woods had started to go ablaze. Roshi! Han dashed over the clearing and grabbed his fellow guard by the arm. We're getting some space away from these little bugs. An argument here. Guys, I think we're making them retreat. John called out as he watched the taller Faunus grab his cohort and leap off the edge of the cliff. He went sailing over the chasm and landed on what remained of the steeple, standing precariously in the center of the gap. The students watching had conflicted feelings about their targets running. On one hand, they were relieved the fighter they couldn't put down, and the man who turned the ground into lava were finally stepping back, maybe long enough for them to take a break and gather their strength. On the other hand, that meant they might try and retreat, and if they didn't find some way to stop and apprehend them more effectively, then all this fighting would have been for naught. I'd say we should stop them, but there won't be a point if we couldn't actually beat them. Anyone got any bright ideas? Gar waved his hand out and broke down the ground surrounding them, creating sizable cracks in the rock. The lava seeped into the crevice before it could build up and surround them all on all sides. He lowered his arms with a huff and started to catch his breath in the moment of pause. He looked around at the expressions on everyone's faces as they stared on their foes. They were being cautious, trying to analyze their opponent's abilities and tactics as best they could in order to gain some advantage. God couldn't blame them for their hesitation. He had never met another Faunus quite like him. He never knew his parents, so he had no one to put his strange ability into context. The Mind Conqueror had always been there with him to give him a helping hand and carry the burden of an unknown semblance. But no matter how much they cared and looked out for him, it would always be a sympathetic feeling, not an empathetic one. Many people had been frightened by him when they saw him clad in aura. They feared he might one day grow too powerful and become a threat to others. And there were even some attempts on his life when he was younger. It had been so isolating and confusing that Garo still hesitated to bring his power out. Things got easier as he grew up and people didn't fear him as much, but still he never met another person or Faunus that was quite like him until he came to Ville. Now in these ruins surrounded by shattered grounds and molten rocks, he started to grasp the fear those people experienced. These students were rising huntsmen and huntresses, some of the best their schools had to offer, but they still hadn't been able to put the noble guards down. They had fought valiantly and showed much heart and determination, but these Faunus were not so easy to put down. Gar wanted to meet others like him for much of his life. Now he understood just what kind of threat they were when they were out of control. Those with enhancement semblance should gather their powers now. Wai said in a hushed voice as she brought her rapier up before her. She held it straight up and placed her index and middle finger against the blade. Her hair started to sway for a breeze picked up by her gathered powers. We need power in order to break through the aura. I'll compensate for your other attributes with my glyphs. Everyone else, I ask that you hold them off as best as you can. You sure that's gonna work? What other choice do we have? The Harris frowned at her blonde teammate's question. Just asking, but no arguments here. Yang's eyes went red as she punched her arms. I'll do whatever I can to knock these guys down. We can hold them off for a little bit, right? Absolutely. Just as much power as you can. We're gonna need monsters to take down these monsters. Monsters. For monsters. Gar looked down at his hand before looking up at the White Fang members catching their breaths on the steeple. He looked around and saw the other White Fang members had come out of hiding and were approaching to help in the fight. If being a monster was really necessary. Okay. Everyone looked on in surprise as Naruto sheathed his Nodachi and stepped away from the group. He walked ahead confidently, casually stepping over the cracks filled with scalding hot magma and air. Before he could reach the end of the cliff, his shoulder was grabbed by Sasuke with a fierce look in his eyes. You can't! Need a distraction? Someone to hold him off? Who better than me? What if you come back to us? I won't. I'm almost totally sure I won't. Naruto casually joked with a nervous smile. He pulled his friend's hand off his shoulder and looked back at his friends. I'll buy you all some time. Get your strength back. Okay. Naruto turned back to the chasm, and the guard separated from them. His eyes panned to the side as he saw a grim mask emerge back out with the weapons trained on him and his friends. With a deep breath, Naruto closed his eyes and cleared his thoughts. He imagined he was standing in a deep puddle and bent down to submerge his arm. Just this much was the limit of his control, but right now, control wasn't the issue. Naruto fell and dove into the puddle. He felt his whole body be engulfed under the warm sensation of water. His body becoming lighter as he sunk deeper and deeper until he closed his eyes and disappeared. Hunting. Kin was pissed off. She ran through the trees and jumped from treetop to treetop in an effort to spot her target once again. The Elysian member noticed when those other three came to help the little girl before she had been caught by Kidomaru and Jirobo's combined efforts. She had waited and prepared to strike them from a blind spot, but before she could attack, they started running. They just ran off together to the forest and between the trees. If they gave a damn about the bells they were ringing while running by, they certainly didn't show it. It almost seemed like they didn't even bother noticing the sniper rounds tracking them, or the boulders littering the path behind them. Soon enough, the four students divided into three groups. The painted man and sandy blonde woman running off in different directions, while the green-clad boy carried the little reaper away, which was one of the reasons Ken was so annoyed right now. Following the injured girl and weary boy should have been the easiest to catch, yet they still evaded her sight, and those other two had completely disappeared. Shit, this isn't good. Knowing my luck, those two are probably gonna blame this all on me. The dark-haired girl narrowed her eyes and snarled at the hypothetical scenario. If she went back up the cliff and they pointed the blame on her, she would not let them walk away unscathed. Drawing out the needle, she hissed slowly. I swear the moment they opened their mouths, her bells ringed, and with it the sound of Kidomaru's rifle going off. Birds fluttered out of the trees, and bullets had gone by before they saw the shadows of Jirobo debris pelting in the forest. A small smirk grew on her face, happy to see her target had slipped up and triggered the alarm. Her smirk fell, however, as another bell rang some distance behind her. Another shot was immediately fired. Before Jirobo could even toss his projectile, another bell rang further down the forest. Another after that. Bells went off one after another all around the forest, alerting the attackers to their target's location. However, unless they had multiplied in the time Kana had lost sight of them, or they had all suddenly developed the super speed, they were settling off too many alarms too quickly. Kidomaru seemed to notice the oddity and stopped wasting his ammo. Jirobo, however, was not so savvy, and unlike Kidomaru, his source of ammunition was plentiful. Damn that empty-headed fool! Ken jumped down from the tree and grabbed as waves of smoke ran over the forest after Jirobo's rock had impacted. She shielded her eyes and ran through the trees, wary of the falling rock storm and the damnable fool to blame for it. The dark-haired woman looked around to try and spot her targets once again. She had to know how they were doing this. Hearing one of her bells close by, Ken waited in case Jirobo continued to be a thundering dumbass and pepper everything in stone. It seemed this was one ringing bell that went ignored while all the others chimed together in orchestra of confusion. She carefully approached the tree and looked at it from certain angles, seeing where the bell would be blocked from view by the branches surrounding them. She was surprised to see a filament of wire gently pulled on the bell to ring them. Like it, I gotta admit, it was a pain in the ass to spot the damn thing when you have them so well hidden. But when I figured out where one was, I realized you had them hidden in ways that they couldn't be spotted. Kin's face settled into a scowl, and she let a needle slip into her hand. She turned around to see the man with pain on his face standing across from her with a cocky smirk. His hands were in his pockets, but she could spot the wires coming out of them and going taut in his pulse. Just had to keep looking after that, and now I get the great slaps of rock at my beck and call. Just to emphasize his point, the wires had stopped ringing bells except for a single one some ways away, followed by rocks falling down and reducing that area to smithereens. Your friend ain't bright, is he? Ken whipped her hand out and sent several needles flying towards the annoying bastard's eyes. However, he pulled his hands out of his pockets before swiping them out. Her needles were knocked out of the air after his wires intercepted them. He let out a chuckle before wildly waving his arms and bringing his wires around him. With a grunt, he threw his hand out, and Ken dodged as wires straightened out and pierced forward. And Ken dodged the point of the wire, hearing it break through the bark behind her as she rolled out of the way. When she tried to jump back up, she looked back in horror. In an instant, she dropped back to the ground to evade the wire slicing through the wood and swinging towards her back. The dark-haired girl kicked off the ground and darted towards him. Staying low to the ground, she pulled half a dozen needles out again as she touched him. She sent a jab for his chest with needles sticking out between her knuckles. However, the young man spun on his feet, avoiding her dive. Her needles scraping against his wire before they constricted against her wrist. The young woman couldn't even get out a gasp before she was pulled off of her feet. The painted man laughed as he spun her around him before she slammed against the side of a tree. "Bet it was a ton of fun watching the kid get picked on by your friends," he mocked, almost going on deaf ears as Kim gagged and tried to find her breath. Not so much fun on the other side, is it?" Kim simply craned her head back to look up at Kim and leveled the most vicious glare she could muster. When she got back on her feet, she was going to put him down, and when he was down, she was going to make sure he experienced some of the worst, most unimaginable pain at the end of her needles. She was sure she could hit some certain spot on the body that made things worse. "By the way, if you see your friends again, tell them thanks for all the rocks." She was hoping to get some heavy ammo to chuck back. Kim looked up at him in confusion before she felt a strong wind start to pick up between the trees. With it came a chill that ran up her spine before she desperately looked around for the origin. The treetops swayed and the leaves billowed in the wind they were caught on. Kim feared that a natural storm had suddenly kicked up, and they were just about to be caught in the hurricane. And while her fear of natural disaster forming over her was assuaged, another fear took its place. The sandy blonde emerged from the forest in a casual stroll. She walked at a slow and even pace despite the wind kicking up around her so wildly. She noticed Kim stare and looked her way before smirking and giving her a flirtatious wink. With a flick of her hands, two fangs slipped into her palms and immediately unfolded. She let them hang with her arms and walked up to one of the giant rocks that had been thrown down. Her smirk stretched a little tighter, and Kim could see a glint of something dangerous in her eyes. The sandy blonde reeled her fans back as wind built up around her weapons. The gust grew more and more powerful before she let out a mighty yell and waved her fans up. Kim's jaw dropped as the giant boulder was lifted up and sent flying back into the cliff by the rush of wind. The fan-wielding girl cackled as she started running around the forest with her fans at the ready. She disappeared, but Kim could see the boulders that lifted the forest flying up and back into the cliff where they were first thrown. If Kitamari and Jiro were still positioned there, then they would have to start moving, or they would get crushed. She heard the sound of a gunshot going off that broke one of the oncoming boulders, but several more flew up in its place. They all struck the spot that the shot had come from and reduced it to a rubble. Another one flew over the top and landed over the cliff, slamming into something and causing it to explode. A bullhead? Oh shit, that sounds expensive. The painted man mocked and looked over at her. Did that belong to the White Fang, or was that your personal item? On that topic, mind telling me who you are working? Kim refused to let him finish and threw another set of needles. He casually blocked her. Her other hand whipped another set out. The cocky boy waved his wires out to knock them from the air. She heard a smile, and he realized his mistake too late as one of the needles exploded in his face. As he coughed and gagged on the burning smoke, Kim dug a needle under her wrist and snapped a wire that trapped her. Thankfully, she brought a dust needle just in case. The dark-haired woman booked it through the forest, not daring to look back as she escaped that despicable painted bastard and that crazy woman controlling the wind. The explosion was one of the bullheads, wasn't it? What if that bitch kept sending more of them up there and all the bullheads were wrecked? Was she supposed to trust that Robo did a competent job? That's like expecting the sky to be red and the sun to be blue. Kim grit her teeth as she kept running. It pissed her off beyond relief, but she wasn't going to risk herself against these people. She didn't know the extent of their abilities, and that was dangerous to be able to go into a fight without knowing. She ran along the trees and headed for the edge of the cliff to climb up the adjacent one side. However, she caught a glint of something appeared at her side in an instant. Kim's eyes widened and she looked over to see the hooded girl still being carried by the other boy. She drew her sight and aimed at the end at the Kim before narrowing her eyes. She raised her arms to defend, but it wasn't enough to stop the impact of the bullet, sending her into the back of a tree. Kim slid down the side of the bark and gagged before opening an eye to balefully glare at her attackers as she tried to escape again, but noticed the wires wrapped around her and the tree. They tightened around her and tied her against the base of the oak tree. She thrust around and tried to force her way out, but to her fellow, "Oh, damn it! Let me go! Let me go! Sorry, but I can't do that." The blasted painted man snaked as he joined the hooded girl and pink-eyed boy in standing over her. Her screaming and thrashing around drawn them out as they just watched her try and break free. She tried to reach for more of her needles, but the tightness around her arms stopped them from sliding into her hands. We apologize for how tight it is, but considering what happened the last time we allowed a friend of yours to move around freely, we don't wish to risk you doing the same thing. Damn it, they figured it out from Saku. Even after he was dead, that jerk was still a pain in the ass. So, anything you want to tell us, like your name or what you're doing here, or how about why you're colluding with the White Fang members to get a drop on my brother? The sandy-haired girl strolled up to their side and crossed her arms over her chest. And don't expect your buddies to be lending a hand anytime soon. I might not have aim, but I'm sure the quantity was enough to at least get them running with their tails between the legs. There was no way they were dead, but they weren't gonna stick the necks out there and come help her. Damn it, this is going south real damn fast. Please, we weren't trying to hurt you. The hooded girl spoke up and looked down at Ken with a pleading look. We just want to know what's going on. What are the White Fang trying to do in Vale? Who are you and the other people you're working with? Ken stared up into the silver eyes looking back at her and tried to find a hint of deceit or treachery in them, but no matter how hard she looked, she only saw earnestly and naivety. This girl really wasn't holding a grudge after everything Ken had done to her. Please, just tell us what we want to know. Or we can turn you into the authorities and let them have a few rounds with you. Kakeru, stop that! The youngest girl frowned up at the painted man who just shrugged his shoulders in response. She turned back to look at Ken with hope in her eyes. Please tell us, and we'll do what we can to help you. We'll put you under protection, and you don't have to worry about the White Fang or Toshiro chasing after you. While it was laughable that she thought the animals or the wannabe model were the worst there was to fear, Ken was still amazed by her sincerity. She really would protect her if she decided to talk him. She could get away. The hunters in training all looked down at her in confusion as Kim started to softly chuckle to herself. The dark-haired girl giggled and snorted in amusement at a joke they didn't recognize. She finally started to come down and looked up at the short-hooded girl that offered her a chance. I was down there. I was down here helping while they shot at you and tried to take you down. I know, but that doesn't mean you can't. Let me finish. Kim interrupted, her voice filled with amusement. You were down here, being chased and cornered and shot at like a wild animal, and those sadistic freaks up there wanted to make sure that they could settle the score. So I was down here to make sure that they did. It wasn't just to set up the bells so they knew where you were. The girl still looked confused, but the older students seemed to realize what she was talking about. There were bound to be a few nasty emotions while you were getting toyed around with. Bound to be a few over there while those morons hashed things out. So what do you think I was doing the whole time? The green-clad boy and painted man and sandy blonde stepped out and drew the weapons as they heard a shuffle further into the forest. The hooded girl looked over as her eyes widened in horror. Who was keeping them away the whole time? A bear wolf leapt out from the greenery and towards the students with its claws out. The green-clad boy was the closest, sliding in and slashed it over the body repeatedly. He then spun over its back and pressed the muzzle of his gun into its head before pulling the trigger. The Borutus came charging in like a speeding ball before immediately coming to a stop. The painted man grit his teeth as he kept the spinning grin locked in position, while wires wrapped all around it. With a yell of effort, he yanked down and sliced the board to pieces. Wind rushed and knocked the other charging beasts away before they could close in around them. More and more grins started to approach as the students realized they were about to be overrun. All the negative feelings from the battle over in the clearing had called to them, and without the rocks to block them and came to out the numbers, they could move freely. We have to go back. Oh wait! The red-haired girl bent down beside Kane and started pulling the wire that trapped her. When it wouldn't give, she pulled out her scythe and started cutting through it. Just hold on, I'm getting you out of here. Ruby, I have to help her. The girl identified as Ruby cut through the last of the wires before she was suddenly yanked off her feet. She stumbled and was picked up by her friends, and they retreated back, but not before she called back. Run, please, come with us. Could she defy the orders and be the outlier to all the other people that try to escape Elysium? She thought about the idea for a moment before a dry chuckle escaped her lips. If she really did go with them and was taken in, it wouldn't be long before she was dead. She'd probably be killed in captivity and made to look like a suicide. More than likely, the group sent to her would make another example out of her under Orochimaru's orders. No matter what way she looked at it, the moment she became a part of Elysium was the moment her fate was sealed forever. But if she did go, this at least seemed a fast way. She looked up and saw through the myriad of grain running through the forest towards the fight. A small number came approaching her with snarling teeth. Ken softly chuckled and closed her eyes. If she was going to listen to them pounce, she damn sure wasn't going to watch them coming. Hunting. The students all looked at their friend with varying degrees of shock at all. Blake, Sun, and Sasuke were the only ones not surprised because they had seen it before. But for the others, this was the first time within seeing their friends cloaked in orange and hunched over in all fours. The White Bang members are armed and emerged from the trees, immediately stopped in their tracks. They stepped back in panic at the sight of the boy looking between them so quickly like a rabid animal. His blanked eyes finally turned into two similar figures in the middle of the chasm. I know you said you faced a boy that might have been a noble guard, but I didn't believe you. So many of us gathered together in one place. I can't help but feel like this is fate playing its hand of some kind. Rochi's voice reverted through his aura as he looked over at Han. Are you sure there's no chance we can convince him to stop fighting? You just be wasting your breath. Han responded, and if you want to survive, I suggest you get ready to fight. Naruto tilted his head to one side while staring at Han and Rochi across the gap. He tilted his head the other way. He slowly let his arm hang as he reeled back as far as he could. The people around the clearing watched in silence as his upper body nearly bent completely back before stepping up and his arm expanding and stretching towards his enemies. Han roared, the steam bursting off of his body as he prepared for the incoming attack and knocking it aside with a heavy punch. Rochi had not been so prepared and jumped to the side. He fearfully looked at the trench Naruto's claw had torn through the rock. Oh, what the hell? Get back! Naruto's arm came swinging in and obliterated the foundation of the steeple. The structure started to crumble and fall down as Han grabbed Rochi's arm. With a mighty leap, they jumped off the falling rumble and made their way back to the cliffside ruins. Naruto wasted no time leaping through the air to attacking them. Shit! Han threw Rochi aside and jumped back to avoid the fox's wrath. His claws came down and tore through the ground before swinging back up for the body. Han couldn't jump back again as the speed and stretching appendage moved too quickly for him. Instead, he roared and guarded as they struck his arms and sent him flying back. Han bent a tree and dropped to the ground before yelling, "All soldiers, concentrated fire on the boy! Suppress his movements!" The White Bang members quickly raised their guns and fired at the enemy presence. Naruto stumbled back and raised his arms to defend against the onslaught of bullets. After being surrounded by gunfire, the Faunus let out a primal roar before leaping through the air. He sailed right over Han and barreled into the trees, attacking White Bang shooters and knocking them to the trees that got in the way. Bastard! Han grumbled as he made to fall after the fox. However, his head was knocked to the side, and Han felt a powerful sting through the cheek that made him lose balance. He found his footing again and nursed his jaw before looking down at his blown attacker. Yang smirked and gripped her gauntlet while her eyes turned red and a faint yellow outline covered her body. Ah, don't tell me you forgot about us so soon. That'll hurt a girl's feelings. You little. Another blur dashed alongside the ground and tackled into his leg. Han's knee bent from the forest, and Yang jumped up to grab his arm. The Faunus quickly found himself on the ground with Yang catching him in an arm lock while Kiba locked his legs together. The Nozaka's features were a little sharper, a telltale sign of him utilizing his semblance. While the same yellow outline covered his body, Han hissed as Kiba increased the pressure and snarled him. So, I think we finally figured out your weaknesses. The wind arcs in your attacks, the ton of wasted movements. We feel stupid not realizing it earlier. You got all this speed and power, but you're just an amateur when it comes to fighting, right? Yeah, continued. I'm sure how big you are, and in the fact that you can glow in the dark is enough to intimidate most people you meet. We're trained to fight the scariest things in the world and beat the baddies. So if we get scared of you, we might as well quit now. If you want to prove us wrong and pull out some hidden skills you keep on the back burner, I suggest whipping it out now. Han tried to escape from their locks, but the two teens' strength persisted. The golden glow around their bodies was enhancing their powers, not unlike his own semblance. His eyes darted around in panic and finally took notice of Weiss standing over to the side as her hair wiped out. She was in the center of a golden cliff that shined brightly and covered the others in a similar glow. Leonora stepped forward as they were graced with the boost in power by the sneeze cliff. The two fighters irradiated a powerful raging intent as Nora grinned and spun her hammer in hand. Yeah! With his free arm, Han slammed down on the ground beneath them. The rock shattered and splintered under the force of his fist. The edge of the cliff they fought on gave way after being split apart. Yang and Kiba quickly untangled themselves and jumped away as Han clambered to his feet and charged for solid ground. The moment his feet were steady again he felt a massive weight come swinging into his ribs. Han's vision blurred momentarily and the air rushed from his lungs as he doubled over and cradled his side. He gasped for air and looked down to see the short orange-haired girl carrying her massive hammer. Nora grinned maliciously and spun her weapon in her hands before twirling around. Han didn't wait for her to come around and met the end of her hammer with his fist. The two incredible forces collided and cratered the ground from the sheer power. Han's fist and forearm throbbed in pain, but he felt victorious to see the orange-haired powerhouse blown off her feet and into the air. His sense of victory died, however, as she flipped through the air and reeled her hammer back before slamming it into the ground and dislodging a dozen giant pieces of rock. Lee slipped in behind the preposterous of the protrusions of stones and gravel. He took a steady breath, concentrating and loosening his muscles before they immediately tightened up again. Lee felt a swell of power fill his body as he roared and kicked one of the giant rocks at Han. His leg blurred at blinding speeds, and he sent every rock through the air to strike the behemoth down. Stay down, scoundrel! Don't and you'll break under the weight of our assault. Han! Roshi yelled, recovering from the pile of melting rubble. He hit too hard in the madness. The ape spotted his comrade in a pinch and quickly stuck his hand into the ground. The spot he touched started to overheat and bubble with lava before swinging up and creating a field of flying molten rock between his fellow guard and the attackers. The red-clad faunus raised his hands and caused the lava to lurch forward like a wave, but before it could spread further, there was a mighty crack that shook the ground. Roshi gawked and stared in disbelief as a major portion of the ground before his lava wave started to rise up. The rock seemed to raise and bend back, stopping Roshi's attack before approaching its intended target. Millions and millions of dust particles rose up from beneath the ground surface to raise a massive chunk off the cliff. Dust, rock, and sand particles moved in perfect synchronization with each other. Everyone stared at the phenomenon in awe before looking over at the source of the oddity. A glowing figure clad in sandy brown light raised his hand as the sand moved with it. I don't like using this very often, but you made me do it, so congratulations. Your rebellion is being cut short. Roshi gulped. Gara, please, you can't. Yes, I can. He threw his hand forward as the particles collected together and formed a crude tendril from the ground. With unnatural speed, the tip of the tendril spread forward and knocked Roshi's feet out from under him. The point of Gara's weapon turned red hot from coming into contact with Abe, but still fast enough to knock him away. It came swinging back for Han, and the massive man threw his fist into it like he expected it to be a solid mass. But with a quick burst of steam from his body, he dispelled all the particles around him, stripping Gara of his attack. Han's eyes focused as he aimed a massive sneer at his opposing guard. However, his eyes widened as more particles started to form together and constrict into small masses. With a casual flick of his hand, he sent them at blistering speeds to strike over Han's entire body. He usually waved his fist through the air and summoned more steam to counter them, but they sped in too fast for him to stop him. Could he always do that? Weiss indignantly cried to Lee. Why couldn't he start with that? Gar has bad memories of holding that form. He only uses it when things become too dire. Lee looked down and noticed how much of the clearing had actually started to disappear with Gar's technique. Fighting is going to get a lot harder without proper footing. Blake shrugged. Well, if they finish this quicker, then we won't have to worry about that. I'm not the only one thinking some people just got all the luck, right? Between Gar controlling the ground and Naruto wildly barreling through the trees, it certainly seemed a little unfair. Of course, Kiba, Yang, and Nora were too eager to knock the Titan over while he was down, and even consider the difference. If we can leave these two of them, we can leave those two to them. Then can I ask the rest of you for support? And Blake asked. What else is there to do? The White Fang members need to be apprehended while they're still down. The others looked towards the edge of the forest to see the fallen grunts that had been unfortunate enough to be in Naruto's path. They looked back to her for her input, but the black-haired fawness could only watch the carnage with worry in her eyes. And I need to help with Naruto. Are you sure about that? He looks like he has everything under control. No, he doesn't. Blake took a deep breath and stepped forward while she did her weapon over her back. Better to approach the boy with an open hand than a closed fist, or hand gripping a cleaver and a katana. She had helped calm him down once before at the docks when it seemed like he was out of control. So once again, she warily stepped up. His rampage came to a sudden halt as Naruto's head bolted upwards and looked further into the forest in silence. It took a moment in confusion before Blake realized she heard something in the forest. It was slow but steadily grew in volume as he came closer. Out of the way! Move! Kakudo and Tamara burst through the forest without any thought of the dangers and enemies surrounding them. Moments later, Ren came out with Ruby carried in his arms and firing shots over his shoulders. They're coming! Ruby! Yang called out to her sister once she saw the state she was in. Yang, I'm sorry, but we couldn't stop them. The students looked at their comrades in confusion, but the questions were quickly answered when the roar of a horde of beowulfs echoed through the forest. In a matter of seconds, grim of all shapes and sizes started to pour out in the small clearing. Several White Fang soldiers who had been disarmed and unprepared for the stampede were quickly tackled and swarmed on by a myriad of different monsters. Get back! Imperial yelled as she threw her shield and crushed the chest of a charging Beowulf. She caught it on the return and leaped back before Ursa and Bobertus could catch her. She spared a look over her shoulder and saw them fill the empty spots of the clearing until they were completely blocked out. We're surrounded. Get together. Don't let any of them blindside you. John and Tintin were quick to come to her side and formed a circle alongside her to keep their eyes on the creatures. Kiba, Nora, and Lee slid in together in their stances as Yang barreled through some grim to reach to reach her sister and Ren. Sasuke found himself together with Kankura and Tamara while Weiss turned the revolver out her sword for another round of battle. The groups prepared for another movement from the living embodiment of evil that cornered them before they spotted the ground beneath them broke apart and connected around the limbs of the grim until they could no longer move. Gar yelled, both hands out as he concentrated on stopping the grim from rampaging or attacking the others. He looked over to the forest and saw even more beasts approaching to attack. With a grunt of effort, he waved his hands out and created a wall of sand to block the oncoming horde. The claws and tusks burst through the sand for a moment before immediately repairing when he concentrated. I'll restrain their movements and kill them quickly. Attack! Blake! Son called out to his friend with his staff in hand. Get over here before you're surrounded. The black-haired cat heard her friends and team call for her to get to safety and quickly obligated. Jumping back from lunging Beowulf and slicing its head off with one swing, Blake made sure to keep an eye on Naruto. She almost couldn't spot his friend in the rush of black fur and red eyes, but she did see him in the midst of the herd. Where did he avoid the grim? Roaring louder than all of the grim that filled the clearing, Naruto rose up on his back legs and spotted his targets and knocking away some grim. With another roar, his arms stretched up and behind him before his claws wrapped around an Ursa Major. He jumped and cleared the treetops before reeling back and spiking the grim down towards Han and Roshi. Move! Han jumped back and avoided the oncoming grim before scowling up at the orange-clad animal. He leapt up to the air and clasped his hands together before bringing them down like a hammer on his head. Naruto's body went flying down into the ground and created it before Han landed and yelled back, Roshi, this is too far. Tell them to get to the bulkhead out. Already on it. They're going to get away. White called out as she stabbing approaching Ursa through the brain. With a spin, she dissolved her sword and returned to her ready stance. We have to stop them. Be my guest. Tamara folded her hands together and stabbed them repeatedly in the eye socket of a beowulf she had caught under her arm. The rest of us are pretty goddamn busy. There's no end to them. Just hold out. There has to be an end to this. The students did their best, but it didn't seem like the numbers were thinning out at all. For every grim they slay, two more would take its place. It seemed like this assault would never stop. And Beowulf bodily climbing over the heads of the others, before leaping at the students. They started coming and prepared to defend, but realized they didn't need to. The Beowulf was raised a few meters off the ground and floating there weightlessly for a few moments. Its limb hung uselessly in the beast tilted its head in confusion before it was suddenly launched into the sky at blinding speeds. They looked up in surprise before they saw another group of Grim at the edge of the clearing being blown away with a purple blast of energy. They watched in shock before joy and relief filled them as they saw the outline of a tall woman in heels waving a riding crop around as Grim went flying. I cannot begin to describe my exasperation, shock, and disappointment with you all at this moment. Glinda Good Witch's irate tone pierced through the roars of the Grim as she angrily fixed her glasses up her nose. When we get back to Beacon, I'm going to have a very long word with you all about your inflated sense of freedom in our school. A giant Ursa came up behind the stern woman and was prepared to maul her from behind. A yellow flash shined from behind the beast before it came to an unnatural stop. It fell apart into several large pieces as another blonde figure landed beside her. Professor Goodwitch, I agree with you, but perhaps we should postpone the punishment until after we are clear. I understand, Mr. Namakase, but there will be a punishment, I guarantee that. Just because they deign to make us aware of what was about to transpire does not acquit them for their mistake in the first place. But we came to tell you something bad was going to happen. Can we at least get a pat on the back? Nora asked hopefully with a flutter of her lashes and a look of pure hope on her face. It died a cold death with Glinda's icy glare as she waved her riding crop and snagged a Bulbatus away like a fly. Darn! The soldiers, move up! Minotaur barked back into the forest as he spun his three-pronged knife on his finger. As the soldiers started to come into the clearing and mow down every Grim they could see. The beast took a few well-placed shots to take it down, but the herd was starting to thin and their bodies already begun disintegrating. Kids! Minotaur jumped over Ursa and stabbed it in the head before landing by the group of students. You have to get back. If you're injured, we'll take care of your wounds. Mr. Namakase, Ruby pointed over the edge of the cliff where the two noble guards were fending off the Grim and waiting for their escape route. Over there. I know, Ruby, but getting you kids to safety comes first. No, Naruto, he's over there too, and he used his semblance again. Minto looked back and saw the outline of his son's aura-clad body lying on the ground by a dissolving Ursa. The moment he did, Minto's sense of urgency in the situation vanished as his eyes narrowed dangerously on the two white-fanged members close to his son. The students felt the intent wafting off of him and watched as he stepped forward with his knife at his side. But he immediately raised his knife to block a barrage of bullets from striking him and his students. A hail of bullets started raining down over the clearing as everyone ducked for cover. Gar raised another wall of defense to shield them as Glinda used telekinesis to protect her and the soldiers. The Grim were reduced to bits, torn apart by the shots and the minigun that decimated the ruins as the latter dropped from the bouquet hovering just over the chasm. Roshi called out to his partner as Han stepped up and grabbed the ape about the shoulder. With a mighty toss, he threw his fellow guard into the air for him to grab the ladder. Following after him, he leapt into the chasm and grabbed hold of it before he started climbing up. They returned to normal with the deactivation of their semblance and got into the bulkhead's compartment as the man behind the minigun continued to rain fire down upon the ruins. A few of the students looked up to see some other bulkheads waiting over the top of the mountains to escape. They're getting away, someone yelled over the deafening echo of the Gatling gun. We noticed them. Gara, can you reach them with your sand? I can't focus on blocking the shots and do that at the same time. Then drop the shield. We'll take care of the others. Does anyone have a shot? The bulkheads continued to ascend, and it seemed like they were going to get away. It was halted, however, as a giant orange claw had clamped down around one of the wings and hindered its movements. The people aboard the aircraft lurched around in shock before a second claw stretched up to them and wrapped around the hull. The orange fox on the ground bodily pulled down the ship and tried to crash it with sheer force. He kept screaming at the top of his lungs and tried to yank the giant vehicle down to get back at the enemies he was so focused on. The minigun turned to the arm holding them down and started firing on it. The extended limb bubbled under the trauma, and the grip started to falter. Not before Naruto gave a menacing roar and clenched the wing as tightly as he could. The wing bent around his fingers, and the turbine started to catch fire from the damage. Naruto's other hand slipped off the hull as the bulkhead tried to gain altitude, but struggled with its damage. The vehicle started spinning out of control and landed on top of the mountain in flames before it exploded completely. Gar's shield and Glinda's defense were lowered as they appeared to be in the clear. No one was shooting at them anymore, and the Grim that had avoided being caught in the crossfire had run before the hunters decided to take them out as well. The Atlas soldiers slowly raised their weapons and stepped forward as they approached the orange anomaly at the end of the broken cliff. "Put those down!" Glinda barked and caused the men and women to flinch in surprise. "If you point your weapons at one of my students again, then I will not hesitate to disarm you." "Of course, our apologies, ma'am. We didn't know that was one of your students. We thought a Grim." "Well, you better had remembered that." Glinda strode forward and stood next to Minato. "Can I ask you to go over there and check on the wreckage?" "Of course, Mr. Namikaze." Blake spoke up before Minato could vanish and turned to the hunched over form of the Oracle Fox. "What about Naruto? He needs someone to calm him down." Minato gave the black-haired fondness and her friends a reassuring smile. "He doesn't need us to calm him down. I know you're all worried, but he just needs a moment to realize the threat is gone. He'll be okay. Trust him." Their mouths opened to challenge that point, but Minato disappeared in a flash of yellow and appeared again on top of the mountain to check the wreckage. The team of young hunters all looked to their friend and waited for some sign that he would return. That grew larger as the moments passed, and Naruto still looked feral while his aura hid all his features. The teams looked between each other in worry before they finally noticed that his shoulders stop heaving and his arms lowered to his side. The orange aura that covered his body slowly disappeared to reveal the blonde boy underneath. He immediately dropped to his hands and knees when the last of it disappeared, and he gasped for air. His friends comrades were quickly to his side, then kneeling by his side as John bent down and took an arm around his shoulder. Naruto looked around at the people surrounding him and the damage that had been caused while he was unconscious. "So, did we win?" "Hunting, it was reckless, it was stupid, it was asinine. I expect at least some modicum of common sense and self-preservation for my students, and I'm realizing that is something not one of you possess. Yes, Miss Nee, even you. You're lucky. The message you gave the Atlas soldiers was passed on to us in time. You all barely even gave him enough details before you went running into the fray. Unfortunately, this kind of behavior is something I have come to expect of my students, but I'm shocked and appalled to see they roped in other students from Haven and Shade as well, upperclassmen at that. You all should have known the risk of this so-called operation better than anyone. I understand Shade's discipline is somewhat lax compared to Beacon's, but enough to seems to transcend borders." Glinda wiped a hair from her eyes and tried to regain her composure after her tirade as Minato stood by and nodded in complete agreement. Osmond simply stood there silently in the student quarters and waited for his deputy to finish speaking her mind before looking down at the accused. All the students looked ashamed and guilty after being chewed out by the blonde teacher. Some of them looked annoyed, and he saw them opening their mouths once or twice to argue a point, but they smartly shut them when Glinda looked their way. All except Team Juniper, who somehow remained docile and asleep through the entire conversation. They already tried waking them up, but it seemed clear that they were out for the count. "Professor," Gar spoke and stood up to face the fulfilled huntsman and consciences directly. "This is my fault. The White Fang members confronted me when I arrived in Vale and tried to convert me to join their effort. I thought with all the recent activities it would be beneficial to learn what I could about the members in operation, as well as locations and possibly identify key members and leaders. I was planning to bring this to the officials and your attention when I had enough to go on, but matters escalated quicker than I expected. I shouldn't have involved the others with it, and I realized that in an effort to do what I thought was right, I risked more than I would have gained." The first mistake was not coming to us with this information. The moment they made contact with you, Mr. Subaku, I understand the need for self-reliance, but we are not your enemies. We would have had help to capture these men before they ever had the chance. Glenn decided, which makes the fact this all ended with nothing to show all the more infuriating. She wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong there. The sharp looks and lectures were all poultry to the fact that at the end of the day, they had nothing to show for sticking out their necks. Mito found the wreckage in the flaming mass with no bodies. None of the bulkheads perched on top of the mountains had anyone in them, and even the navigation logs had been deleted, so no one could find where they came from. Apparently, hidden beneath the bulkheads had been holes in tunnels big enough to fit a large person, dug through the rock in order for a quick getaway. When this was theorized, it seemed impossible with the amount of rock that needed to be moved and the strength to dig it up. Ruby cleared up the confusion with a very peeved expression twisting her soft features. The amount of effort is truly wasted as long as something is gained, and this is no different. Osman spoke sagely as the students raised their heads to look at him. We know more about the abilities and limitations of our enemies than we did before. The fact that such influential members of the White Fang have little to no combat experience is surely a plus, as well as what Miss Rose and Mr. Lightran and Mr. Tsubaku told us about their mysterious attacker confirms that there's another power at play. The silver-haired headmaster nodded to the exhausted party with a small smile. We may not have one like you had all expected, but you are alive and you have learned from this experience, and you have made our enemies realize that they are not as unbeatable as they believed. Well done. A tentative air of relief hovered over the students. That being said, Osman nodded. Glinda, you're all grounded for the rest of the semester. What does that mean? It means that you will not be allowed to leave the campus unless accompanied by an approved guardian. That means no forced picnics, no trips to the city, and no more reckless abandonment. That's not fair. Yang stood up. Miss Goodwitch, you can't just keep us under house arrest. I can. I did it, and you'll have to live with it. But I'm a social creature. I'm going to die of cabin fever if I stay here too long. You should have considered that before you and your friends went gallivanting around the kingdom, trying to solve all of its problems yourselves. Make sure Juniper is aware of this when they wake up. Glinda spun her heel without entertaining any more arguments, and Osman nodded his head and followed. Mito stepped out before sending a quick look back at his son, who lowered his ears and gulped. As he just left, the haggard students sat quietly and considered what was said. Not a word was uttered, and the only reason silence didn't fill the room was Nora's insatiable snoring. Conqueror broke the silence with a chuckle before looking over at Uchiha. This probably spaced out your next trip to the city, huh? That wasn't what I meant. Oh man! Ruby slumped down in her chair with a frown as she knocked her feet on the wood in frustration. We were so close to getting them. We had Miss Goodwitch and Naruto standing, all those soldiers, and that stupid rock jerk had to make a tunnel for them to get away. Ugh, this sucks. And this was the same guy that threw boulders at you with the sniper. Ruby gave a small nod through her frowning to answer her sister's question. Yang cracked her knuckles. Like, well, if I didn't have enough reason to knock those guys around before, you get the chance. You get the chance. You call me too. Assholes deserve more than one beating. Tamar and Yang shared a nod of solidarity. Let us take the headmaster's words to heart. We may not have succeeded in our objective, but we gained other things, experience and a stronger bond of friendship with our new comrades. Lee cheered, somehow still brimming with energy, while everyone else was drained completely. He smiled. I'm especially pleased to know I can put so much faith in my new friends from Team Juniper. Nora made an unintelligible noise as she slammed a fist into John's stomach as he coughed and balled up. I'm sure they think the same. Well, as unfortunate as it is to have our reputation tarnished even further, I suppose some discipline and restriction will do us some good. Whiteside, Yang looked at her white-haired teammate in shock and disbelief as Weiss rolled her eyes. Oh, like you aren't the worst perpetrator here. And sit in the room, enjoy a good book, and learn to control your impulses. The impulse problems are Ruby's, and reading porn is Blake's thing. Blake coughed, and Ruby pouted as Yang pointed at herself. I'm the social one on the team, and who exactly has a life? This is a disaster. Oh, whatever. She's only got well, she's only going to get worse. I think we can call it a night now. Naruto huffed and pulled off the chair before turning to Gaara and his team. The scarred red hair looked up at the blonde before he saw the hand offered to him. He looked back up to see Naruto grin. I never thought I'd actually meet another one like me. That's not a total asshole. I hope we can work together again. Next time, I totally kick ass. Gaara looked at him for a moment before turning to his siblings and partner. When they gave him an affirmative nod, Gaara stood up and took the fox's hand. He gave a small, almost unnoticeable turn in his lips. I hope we can work together more in the future as well. Now that'd be awesome. Sun spoke up with a grin. Love to see the two badass Aura dudes all work together and solve all problems. Hey Gaara, if you or Gaara control that thing, I bet you two could destroy it like all the Grim and Veil. Gaara tilted his head as Naruto just chuckled and shook his head. I think I'm just about ready to hit the hay. Tenten stood up and stretched her arms. Does anyone want to help carry Jennifer back to their room? Should we play rock, paper, scissors to see who carries who? Will be offered before giving a cheeky giggle. Lucy has to pick up Nora. Their expressions turned deadly serious as Nora wanted to pick up the thrashing young powerhouse. Guess it's time to make our moves too. Kankuro stood up alongside the team and made their way to the exit before he noticed they were missing someone. He looked back to his little brother. Hey, hurry up! Not to prepare to play with his friends before he noticed Gaara look at him. He lowered his hand. What is it? My semblance. For as long as I can remember, I've been confused and terrified of it. I've never truly understood the capabilities it has, and I never used it enough to test them. I remember when my aura was first unleashed, and it covered my entire body. I panicked. I thought I was being attacked, and there was no way to stop it. Only time I've ever heard him scream, shh! And I remember the looks that people gave me too. Looks of fear and confusion and wariness. They tried to stay as far away from me as possible because they didn't know what I could do. Neither did I. Gaara looked at his head. I was afraid of it, but I still remember everything. Gaara looked up at Naruto and knew his meaning had gotten across. I never lost control. There was a silence between the two fondness before Naruto gave us a solemn sigh and nodded. Gaara returned it with an almost apologetic look in his eyes before following after his team. What was that? They looked as Naruto gave a heavy sigh and dropped down into his seat. His shoulders hung a little lower, and the fatigue of the day had seemed to catch up with him until they continued to ask him, "What were you talking about?" I think he confirmed something I already knew. Which is what? Naruto scratched his head before looking up at his teammate and friends. That horse fondness could barely fight, but he had control of his power. That monkey guy panicked and didn't even know what he was doing, but he was still awake and aware. Gaara could use his semblance even when he was just a kid, and Mom would always talk normally even when she used hers too. What are you saying? I'm saying that my losing consciousness and fighting like an animal isn't supposed to happen. Naruto shook his head. I trained for 2 weeks against my dad and his friends, but I never came close to getting control over or even being aware of what I was doing. The aura around my arm was the limit. I didn't think this is a matter of training and trying to control my semblance. I think this is what my semblance is. What it's always been. Realization dawned on them when they thought back to the erratic and almost primal nature they witnessed Naruto exhibit in return. That wasn't just the thrill of battle. That wasn't just the situation. It wasn't just a lack of practice. That's my semblance. That's what makes it different. No matter how hard I try, I won't ever be able to control it. When Naruto released his power, he became a raging beast. One behind even his control. End of one beyond even his control. End of chapter 58.